Hello, welcome back to School Age Child Development. Um, Give me just a second here while I share my screen. I'm recording in Zoom this time to see how this works, so let me know what you think about this. We're going to continue talking about cognitive development in the school age child years. Um, you should be seeing my screen now. I'm sharing the PowerPoint with you. We're talking about individual differences in mental development, defining and measuring intelligence. Around age 6, the IQ becomes more stable and it can predict school performance, educational attainment. It's it's a little bit difficult with children that young to really get an accurate idea of what their intelligence really is. Current IQ tests provide an overall score representing general intelligence and separate scores measuring specific mental abilities. They don't measure all the aspects of intelligence, and so a child who may be very intelligent may not test as intelligent as they may actually be. Factor analysis is used to identify abilities measured by intelligence tests. Group administered tests allow testing of large groups, like a whole class or um, children in a certain grade at a whole, in the whole state or even nationwide. They require little training to administer. They're useful for instructional planning. We can get a basic idea of what the children know, then we know what to plan for activities and lessons. They identify students who need further evaluation. So those ones who may be a little bit farther behind, or we may be concerned about a developmental delay, we can get an indication of that with these um, types of tests. Individually administered tests, these you have to be trained, you have to have some experience in order to do them well. So it gets a little bit more complicated. They do provide insight into whether a test score accurately reflects a child's abilities. They're often used to identify highly intelligent children and those with learning problems because we get a norm, right? We get that score for the typically developing child. And then if a child scores higher or lower, then we know that they are either more exceptional or there may be a delay or um, something like that. We have the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scales, 5th edition. These are from age 2 to adulthood. They measure the 5 intellectual factors: general knowledge, quantitative reasoning, visual spatial processing, working memory, and basic information processing. The younger we try to administer these types of tests, the more difficult it is to really get like an accurate score. The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children 5, this is for ages 6 to 16. Younger children, there's a separate scale. It measures the 4 broad intelligence factors: verbal, perceptual, working memory, and processing speed. All right, so individual differences in mental development and other efforts to define intelligence. Sternberg emphasizes the complexity of intelligent behavior and the limitations of current intelligence tests in assessing that complexity. Sternberg's triarchic theory of successful intelligence includes that analytical intelligence or the information processing. And we've talked about that before. You can think about that like the human brain as a computer where you input information, you process it, you think about it, right? And then you act on what you have learned. And then also creative intelligence, generating useful solutions to new problems, thinking outside the box. Um, Practical intelligence, adapting shaping, selecting environments. This is just a nice visual that you can look at here, looking at some of the different types of intelligences and how they kind of work together to help a child be very successful. People who behave intelligently balance three interrelated intelligences: analytical, creative, and practical. And so if we can help a child to develop a good balance of all three of those, then they stand a better chance of being more successful academically. Gardner asserts that each intelligence has a unique neurological basis. So here's a list of Gardner's intelligences, and there are a few more that's not on this list, but we've studied Gardner before in other classes. If you've taken other classes with me, and we'll continue to talk about Gardner and his theory of multiple intelligences. So make sure that you have a solid understanding of what all of those are. Explaining the differences in IQ. So in terms of academic achievement, years of education, and occupational status, certain sectors of the population are advantaged over others. Low income, socioeconomic status, those children are at a disadvantage. Some of those children are enrolled in Head Start programs, which gives them a bump up and helps them kind of close that gap. We look at nature versus nurture. The most powerful evidence on the heritability of IQ involves twin comparisons, which is very difficult because that's a very limited number of like percentage of our population. It's it's just hard to rely on something that's that small of a percentage of all the people in the world. About half of the differences in IQ among children can be traced to their genetic makeup. Adoption studies are used to study the origins of IQ disparities between ethnic groups. And poverty severely depresses intelligence, which shows that there's a significant advantage to having a more enriching, nurturing environment. Okay. Cultural influences, the test bias may contribute to um, if well, and language as well, right? So if a child doesn't speak the language the test is being given in, or if they may have been raised in a culture other than the people who created the test or the like the scenarios or the questions that they're reading about, they may culturally not have been exposed to that type of thinking before, and that can be a disadvantage. Low-income students tend to score lower due to having fewer learning opportunities. There's a stereotype threat, of course. The fear of being judged on the basis of a negative stereotype can trigger anxiety that interferes with performance. I've known several people who have moderate to severe test anxiety. That's a real thing people experience, like some to the extreme of getting physically ill when even just thinking about taking an exam. So cultural influences, we look at the Flynn effect, massive generational gains in IQ. And it's just looking at like historically, okay. The increase is a dramatic secular trend that applies internationally. The amount of increase depends on the extent of societal modernization. And so some of our third world countries, I mean, those children and families may be focused more on survival rather than um, working on academics and things like that. Okay. IQ scores can underestimate the intelligence of children from ethnic minority groups. Flexible testing procedures can enhance that performance. Dynamic assessment is a form of testing in which an adult introduces purposeful teaching into the testing situation. It's consistent with Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, and reveals what a child can attain with social support. And so giving them the instruction or the aid or the information that they really need to be successful helps them score higher. This is just another visual. It's in your textbook. You can take a look at it there. Language and development, vocabulary and grammar. Metalinguistic awareness develops. Vocabulary increases fourfold. We know that they're gaining more and more words almost daily at these very young ages. And so we really need to make sure we're providing opportunities for them to learn new words, new vocabulary, and understanding of what those words mean. So reading contributes enormously to vocabulary growth. Children grasp double meanings and come to appreciate riddles and puns. Our school-age children love joke books. They love telling jokes. They love playing little pranks, right? We know that. When children learn how to read, and it's our hope that children become proficient readers in third grade. And so that really contributes to the more they read, the more words they're exposed to, the more their vocabulary grows. Okay. Mastery of complex grammatical construction also improves. English-speaking children use the passive voice more frequently. Understanding of infinitive phrases and advances. They just have stronger vocabulary and stronger conversational skills. Dramatic gains occur in pragmatics as well. Children can adapt to the needs of the listeners in challenging communicative situations. They can pause when they see someone's not understanding and give a better, more clear explanation. Ability to evaluate the clarity of others' messages improves, and narrative advance in organization, detail, and expressiveness. And we see school-age children begin to write more, and that also contributes to their growth in this area. In families who regularly eat meals together, children are advanced in language and literacy development. It's not the act of eating the food, eating the dinner, it's the act of the communication, the conversation that happens around the dinner table during that family time when they're really not focusing on anything but just themselves and their family. That's the difference between sitting around a table and eating together as a family versus taking your plate or your tray into the living room and eating in front of the television, right? There's no real communication that way. But if we purposefully sit down as a family and eat together and have that conversation, we can see a lot of growth in language development. About 23% of US children ages 5 to 17 speak a language other than English at home. Bilingual development, simultaneous bilinguals, and sequential bilinguals. Bilingual children sometimes engage in code switching where they'll kind of go back and forth between English and Spanish or whatever their home language is. There is a sensitive period for second language development. We don't know the exact age cutoff, but we do know the younger we learn a second language, the more proficient that we'll become, the more successful we'll be at speaking it clearly and appropriately. Bilingual education may proceed in the form of two-way immersion, full immersion or partial immersion. All right. Um, I think I'm going to pause this lecture here. And all right, if you need a break, take a break. If you don't, I will see you in the next lecture and we will finish up this section on cognitive development in the school age years.